Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Norwich Talk for the penultimate in our mini-series entitled The Review. I'm delighted to be joined by the guys from AlongComeNorwich. John and Tom, how are we doing, chaps?
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, all good. Cheers, mate.
Well, this is the second take. And in the first one, I mentioned a parallel in moods at the moment. I think Tom's sort of taking the lead in terms of joy. And I'm going to do my best to zap that from him as we continue to talk about Norwich City in general, but not just in general, since Project Restart. It's a task that we're going to take on and one that we probably won't enjoy very much, but we're going to do it nonetheless. Guys, I want to cast our minds back to a happier time in terms of Norwich City before the Southampton game, before the game in which we just sort of embarrassed ourselves quite a bit on national television. Not the first time we've done it, won't be the last. But I'll turn to you first, John. What were you thinking before that? Was there genuine hope? Was there anything in you that said Norwich City could potentially do this?
We talked about it long and hard on the podcast, and I think we were all under no illusions that it was a huge task. However, if we could just get maybe 3 points or 4 points, or even, best case scenario, 6 from the first 2 games, which looked winnable at the time. We'd been without football so long that we'd lulled ourselves into some kind of sense of, we could actually win, maybe 2-3 football matches on the spin. But I mean, how wrong were we? It was ridiculous. But genuinely, I think all of us thought if we can get a result or two, we're in this. And actually, the way in which the results transpired, had we got that result or two, we would have been banging it, because I think it's probably we'd have we'd have needed those 5 wins that Farker had identified. So yeah, it was probably like a 1 in 50 chance, but it still felt like there was a chance.
You know what? That probably is the most frustrating thing, which is just that how sort of the other fixtures conspired and finished. It was just like, what if? But then that is just sort of the life of being a Norwich City fan. Tom, what do we make of the formation change? Because out of nowhere, we switched to a 4-4-2, and there was this whole debate before, I think it was before lockdown, I think I sort of was part of it as well, that Josip Dermic could be a suitable number 2 to Timu Pukki. What did you make of the 4-4-2? I'll say that before the actual game, because there's a lot to say about it after the game. But before the game, were you sort of excited for it?
Well, it's difficult to talk about feelings before the game, because we've now got the hindsight of not only that debacle at Southampton, but also the games that came afterwards. What I would say is they made a very big deal about the reflecting that they've done, and that the exec committee and the boss, Daniel, we spent a lot of time already in this period already looking for the lessons learned. And knowing that, and they did say that prior to Project Restart getting back going again, knowing that really does suggest why actually he was changing formations, not just for the Southampton game, but then willy-nilly seeming to really, really throw different formations out there and trying different lineups. I remember actually going back way before Project Restart. Yes, John, you're right. We were talking on that pod that whilst none of us thought that it was going to happen, we did say that the one chance they had was if they did hit the ground running with those first couple of games. When we had Ed Wootton, part of the coaching team, on the pod, the month before lockdown, he said to us off mic, "So do you think we can do it?" And we all sort of said, "No, sorry, we don't think you can." And he was like, "Oh, that's nice." And we're like, "Well, just being honest, you've given yourself too much to do. You need basically promotion form for the last few games, and you just haven't shown that we've got the quality in the squad to do it." And you genuinely got the feeling from Ed that night, and speaking to a couple of the players since on some partner stuff that I've done with the team and the club, they genuinely did think that they were gonna do something. And I think that the main issue with that Southampton game was the utter debacle that it turned into. Every coaching session was leading up to these are our 9 FA Cup finals, if you like, or these are our 9-10 cup finals we had coming up. And it was the manner in which we were so roundly beaten, with exactly the same weaknesses that we've had for the last 2.5 seasons, let alone the rest of this Premier League season. I think it just knocked all the wind out of the sails. And I think the coaching team had nowhere to go from that. They basically said, we've been building you up, and actually it's completely failed. And I think they were on a hiding to nothing for the rest of the season, purely for that performance. It's one of the biggest disappointments. And I said at the time, it's up there with the Fulham 6-0. It's up there with the capitulations when all we needed was X and we ended up delivering something so bad. The reason being, and I think we'll always remember that Southampton game from this season, And the reason 6-2 at Newcastle, I think it's going to go the Burnley with Worthington 4-1. It's going to be one of those games that we always remember as the touch point for that summed up how awful that part of the fan experience was. And that's because we hadn't talked ourselves into thinking we were going to stay up. We didn't think we were going to. But we'd all talked ourselves into the fact that it's 11 men versus 11 men, or 16 versus 16 with all the subs. And it is actually possible, it's feasible that we could get 5 from 9. It is actually mathematically very, very comfortable for us to have a really good first 3 or 4 games and then put it into our own hands. But to underperform at that level and to be that poor second half in particular, it's almost unforgivable for me. And I don't think the players could look themselves in the eye and think we've still got a chance after that non-performance on that Friday night.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. What for you was it in terms of the Southampton game that went wrong? Was it sort of Norwich undoing themselves, or was it just genuine quality from Southampton?
It was very similar to what it's been all season, which is patience from Southampton. Farke's first season was when Alec Neil said to Paddy Davitt after the game, "That's the easiest preparation I've had all season." Because effectively, patience is the only thing I need to teach my players. Stick to your game plan. We will get a chance in the end. And if we don't worry. Shuffle left, shuffle right, shuffle left, shuffle right. Keep tracking your players. Don't let them have that unlock pass right through the heart of the defence for the tap in. That was kind of the archetypal way we were scoring the goals in that season, and it continued into the second season when we were actually obviously successful enough to win the league. But the point is, we were wearing teams down. And in the Premier League, no defence was ill-disciplined enough, with the exception of where we really, really were on our game and we passed our way round the defence. Most defences were able to just very, very calmly shuffle left and right, knowing full well that in the first 10 minutes of the second half, we were always going to get a goal. Because Norwich concede in the first 10 minutes of the second half. That's what we do. In the Premier League, that's how Norwich do it.
I think what I draw from what you've just said, which I completely agree with, is it was my main concern at the time, and I think we can all agree it really was Norwich's downfall, which is just genuine quality, which we lacked this season. And I'm sure we can make up for it next season after, whatever, that's all for the future. But my genuine concern before football came back was without the fans, it is then about quality. And Norwich City had proven themselves, as you said, in terms of this idea of after a first half, they just collapse. They'd proven to not be good enough to sort of see it out. And as you said, in the Championship, you can bear it out for a while, can't you? Whereas in the Premier League, you're playing against world-class footballers week in, week out. And I think that probably was my main concern. Now, before we go on to sort of a few more games specifically, I'll ask you this question, John. Obviously, you guys do fantastic work with the fans, etc. So you probably are the best people to ask for this. How big of an impact do you think the loss of fans was? Do you genuinely think it was devastating?
For the players, yeah, I think absolutely. I think I'll kind of come to the point that I don't think the types of performances that the players put in would have been accepted by the masses at Carrow Road. And
absolutely.
Tom, interestingly enough, referenced the Burnley game under Worthington, where I think it was 4-1 that we'd lost. And then Gary Docherty decided just to rugby tackle, kind of as the last defender, took out one of the Burnley forwards. But you could just tell palpably that was it. That was, that was the line in the sand. That wasn't going to be acceptable anymore. And actually then change happened as a result of that. And had those kind of performances, been put in at Carrow Road with a packed full house, I think Daniel Farke probably would be in quite a lot of trouble now. Actually, I think we'd be way more worried about the situation. It's almost that we've given them that slack because the supporters weren't there to, kind of pull them through. And as a fan base, we are pretty tolerant most of the time. We are usually behind the team.
It's interesting you say that, Punt. I don't think we are.
I think we genuinely are.
If you ask Hux, if you ask Dave Carolan, the lot from the early 2000s kind of era, or mid 2000s with Hux, they will say that they came to the club knowing that Norwich are a whingy bunch.
But I think there's whinging.
Other teams will know this place when it's rocking, really hard to play football. And this is what Lambert did in the 7-1, which Carolan will tell anyone who'll listen. He basically said during the warm-up, people were taking the mick out of the Colchester players warming up. In fact, I think David Fox might have been one of them on that day. And he basically said, listen to that taking piss out of you. They think they're big time Charlies. This place will turn quickly if we can get on top of them. And yeah, okay, it was a calamity of performance that day. But I think Norwich are quite quick to whinge. And the interesting thing is Webber did a manful job of fronting up and saying, it's me, don't blame the manager, it's me. I think you're completely right, Punt. He would not be able to have come out and said, please can everyone deflect all the attention off Daniel so he can concentrate on next year, please, and all focus on me instead. That wouldn't have washed with the fans like it has done had we all been shouting and swearing at Farker. Because I think it would come the 6th, 7th, maybe 8th defeat in a row, there might have been a few choruses of you don't know what you're doing and Delia sort it out. Because if you lose 6 or 7 games in a row and we're actually there, it's not like, turn Sky off at 54 minutes after the inevitable second half goal. There's a bigger dissociation with. I watched every game, but I can't tell you I made it to 90 minutes of all of them. I made it past an hour in all of them. But the point is, you turn it off and then you're immediately with your family, or Lisa Ambrose, in your case, Ben, your mum. And effectively, you immediately know, okay, I'm not there anymore. When you are going to the pub, when you are having the top girls, Lisa, when you are walking up the hill to where you park, or whatever your match day experience is, and you're having to live with how awful that second half performance is in every single game, I think you're far more wound up by it. And I actually think the capitulation this season would have been far worse in terms of the blowback on the manager had we been allowed to actually shout and swear at him.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. However, the flip side of that is I don't think it would have happened with a full house at Carrow Road.
That's the question I was going to ask. Do you think that would stop?
It wouldn't have been allowed to happen. I think so. There's a couple of factors for me as to why it went so drastically wrong, and the lack of a crowd is one of them. And I think then the second point is that the lack of leaders probably on the pitch is a huge reason as well, because I look throughout that squad, and the 2 leaders that you identify, as probably the ones, with the exception of Tim Krul, the ones that are going to stand up and be counted. You're probably looking at Christoph Zimmermann and you're looking at Grant Hanley. And, we haven't really talked about that, but pretty much on the eve of the Southampton game, 2 of your biggest leaders are just pulled out of probably what is your biggest game of the season. So we were on a hiding to nothing from the start, really.
Do you genuinely think that the fans would have made that much of an impact? Because I agree, but also at the same time, now this is one I'm plucking out of thin air. In terms of Leon Barnett, he did an interview with Connor on this channel, and he said, I don't know if it was on camera or off camera, but he said that when you're playing at Carrow Road, the fans are there, but they don't influence your decisions. Does that sort of resonate with you, or do you sort of completely disagree? Do you think that's maybe just him?
Zimmermann said the opposite, didn't he? We spoke to Christoph towards the end of the first season he had at Carrow Road, and he literally said, we're trying to play this passing football, we're trying to play Farkball. But to be honest, if the game's not going that well, after 55 minutes, I've had enough of people having a go at me from the river end for not kicking it long. And actually, I will start lifting my head up and booting it. Because I can feel the tension. So I really do think that is dependent on the context of the season. And if you generally have an apathetic kind of crowd during the game, like if we're not in a fighting to stay up, fighting to go up or whatever, then if you play most of your games in that scenario and you're not like a regular week in week out member of the team, I would take Zimbo's word over Leon Barnett because of those points I've just made.
Well, I think it depends, doesn't it, from player to player? It's not just as binary as right. Crowd, kind of puts it in, and then every player is going to perform. Some players can zone it out. Some players work off the opposition fans more than they do their home fans. I probably talk about someone like Grant Holt, who actively upped his performances because away fans were having a go at him.
Like Swansea, he always played brilliantly against Swansea because they gave him grief from the warm up.
Yeah. Absolutely hate him, and
he'll say he doesn't know why. He'll be like, he's like, I don't give a shit about Swansea. I've got no idea why they started hating me.
So it's different for different players. We've had Tim Krul on the podcast before, and he specifically came on the podcast because he wanted the atmosphere to be better at Carrow Road, because he wanted other areas other than the Barclay to start joining in with the chanting and, and the flag waving and all the rest of it. So it matters to some players more than others. But I think just to bring it back to the point or the question that you're asking, Ben, I just think, I'm not sure we'd have picked up many more points than we did, although it'd be difficult not to. But I just think the performances wouldn't have been as tepid or, kind of woeful, in their nature, and fans wouldn't have accepted it. And enough players would have bucked their ideas up to say, all right, well, maybe it's not a 3-0 against Southampton. Maybe it's a 2-1, and we've actually put in a bit of an effort. And then we can kind of take that on to Everton because it hasn't been as shit as it was. So, yeah, I think the fans genuinely make a difference. And it's the club puts so much effort now into kind of selling the fact that the fan experience, the fans being behind the team is a big thing to them. They get the impact that it makes as well.
Yeah, it's such a tough thing, isn't it? I say it's tough. It's not really. All I personally want to see, I'm sure you guys would agree, is, I didn't fear relegation because I just massively fallen out of love with the Premier League because it's just a shit show now, isn't it, to be fair? We know your guys' thoughts on VAR, etc. But we just want to see improved performances. And I definitely agree with you, John, in terms of this idea that if the fans were there, the performance levels might have been a bit higher. But at the same time, I think relegation might have been accepted a bit more. I remember Alex Neil when he went down at the end of the game against Watford. There was cries of there's only one Alex Neil. I would love to have seen that this season, and that momentum sort of carried on into the following season until he then obviously fell off his horse massively and spiraled at Norwich, which I think is probably.
So Benjo, I actually spoke to your namesake, Mr. Kensall, about exactly that example.
Yeah.
I was at the end of season 2 where Alex Neil basically was shaking his head, could not understand why he basically got a standing ovation as when they did the lap of appreciation or whatever at the end of that relegation season. He was like, I failed and I don't get it. I don't get why people are being nice to me. And I said, that, there's when you built up enough goodwill, if you feel there's been the battling performances and you feel that, it's not like we went down in such a pathetic fashion under him. We went, whatever it is, 17 points adrift or wherever we were at the end of the season. But under him, we were much closer. And I genuinely think that Farke would be in really hot water had the fans been there now. The tangible thing that I think would have helped with the fans is when you're slightly on top, when you're having a good spell, for example, Southampton or whoever really, it keeps going a bit longer with the home fans. So, you get a corner, we sing a song, it's cleared. If we get back on the ball, I honestly think that second ball goes into the box a bit quicker if the fans there's still that hubbub of, oh, we've had a corner, we're close, come on, keep pushing, keep knocking on the door. And I feel that it wasn't, I didn't see a lot of non-Norwich games in the behind closed doors things because it was a shit product to watch. And naturally, my interest in the league was waning somewhat. But what I think it was the case across all teams, you would basically see attacks die down and it would return back to the gradual build up from the back far quicker than when you've got fans in stadiums. And I think that's because, especially the home team, when they're on top, or if the away fans are in enough voice and large enough contingent to be noisy, when you are attacking, when you're knocking on the door, the fans are like roaring. And so that if you think about it and you cast your mind back to when football was good and you had fans in there and they clear the ball out for a corner, there's that roar. It's like, yes, come on, get the ball back in, get it down. That is getting the players' adrenaline up. That's getting the blood pumping. And what we had instead was the ball's gone out for a throw. Oh, yeah, good ball, Steve-O. Yeah, all right, yeah, all right. Do you know what I mean? So you're having to manufacture that feeling of this team is on top, and manufacturing that is always going to be harder than having 20,000 people screaming blue murder to keep on top of the other team.
It's such a tough thing, especially for such young players as well and inexperienced players. And as I said earlier, you can forgive the relegation because of sort of the circumstances, but as you said, as we've said, the efforts were just pure shite. And I think the example beyond Norwich is Watford. And I remember, I don't know when it was, I think it's before lockdown or it was during the Watford chairman or someone was like, we wouldn't have won against Liverpool if the crowd weren't there to sort of cheer us on. And we've obviously got Norwich City's example of Manchester City. But I am keen to move on to another sort of crux in terms of post-restart for Norwich City. My other question to you guys, you can decide amongst you who takes the lead on this, is about Daniel Farke's plan B. Now, what is the view on what he did post-restart? Because I mentioned the 4-4-2 against Southampton. We saw a few variations of formations. We saw different personnel. We saw Lucas Rupp playing right wing. What on earth was going on, and why was everything so different?
I think so. Farker had clearly gone away and reflected, as Tom's alluded to earlier, and they'd been away as a management team, and they decided we needed to be a little bit more direct. We needed to have a little bit more in the final third. So let's go with Dermich as a target man. Now, clearly that didn't work, and clearly it didn't work against Southampton, apart from the first 10, 15 minutes where we carved out a couple of chances, and then Southampton quickly worked us out and then just started to pick us off. So it was almost like Farker was floundering from there on in. And, all this criticism that he's had this season of just being too rigid, sticking to a 4-2-3-1, that had all gone out the window. He'd played 3 at the back. He'd played 4-4-2. He'd tried 4-4-3 at one point. He'd probably tried 3-4-3. And he was floundering, and he was looking for a formula that was just going to get him a point on the board or 3 points on the board, so that we had something to work with. We had a bit of momentum to build off.
Yeah.
And it just never came, so you could probably legitimately look at it and go, yeah, he didn't have a plan B and he was searching for a plan B. But I guess what had got us in the position that we were was always just making plan A better. And, and the club have talked about that kind of quite a lot about, right, let's just stick to our philosophy. Let's just make sure that, what we're doing, we just refine that and refine it and make it as good as it can be. But just kind of discarded all of those principles in the hope that we'd pick up a point, in the hope that we'd find something, we'd score a couple of goals. And, I think at that point, it just didn't matter about personnel. It didn't matter about formations. We were just broken. We're just psychologically, after Southampton, we were so shot that there was no coming back from it.
Did he panic, Daniel Farke? Do you think he just panicked and sort of lost it?
I'm not sure it was a panic. I mean, for me, it was just a guy that, he was all out of answers, and he was just reaching, really. I think that's probably the best way to put it. He was reaching for something that was just unattainable at that point.
What do you make of his sort of dealings in the press? Because obviously our good friend, Mr. Southwell, wrote a piece that Daniel Farke didn't take too kindly. And from my point of view, I'll stick by it. I think it was a bit out of line, wasn't it? It was a bit like, right, okay, that's a bit weird. Do you think there were, is that the sign of him cracking? Maybe is that what on earth went on there?
I think there's certainly been signs of Farke feeling the pressure this season more than any. You're bang right. I mean, let's just get it out of the way. He was completely out of order in terms of the language that I've seen that he used towards a junior journalist at Archon. I just think he was completely out of line, and I hope that there's been some kind of apology that's been offered by him or by the club to Connor, because that was kind of way out of line. But yeah, it was a sign that actually your manager's reading the press and your manager's reading tactical dissections, kind of by an EDP journalist. Should that be what he's focusing on, or should he be watching the last 90 minutes of football that Norwich City have played, over at Colney, and then trying to put together systems in place that will rectify the clear deficiencies that there were on show? So when people are starting to read the press and when they're reacting to the press, it was a clear sign for me that he was really, really feeling the pressure.
I think we'll move on from sort of Daniel Farke specifically, Tom. I want to speak a bit about Norwich City's fit. I mean, this sort of goes back to Daniel Farke. I mean, it all does really, doesn't it? But do you think that Norwich City looked unfit? Because that phrase "looked unfit," I sort of bounded that about a bit, and I think it was sort of tossed about within the media. Sort of. Do you think Norwich City looked unfit? Because there's this whole idea that they do double sessions, which seemingly didn't pay off. Do you think that they look they lack match sharpness or whatever?
No, is the short answer. I saw that as well, as a potential reason. No, I don't think so. Webber made a point post season that there was a couple of, and he gave a couple of specific analogies where players had kind of either just shoulder barged our players off the ball, or just suddenly had a turn of pace and blitzed through the middle, and that they basically sat up and gone, we're not fast enough, we're not strong enough. And some of these other squads have got a couple of players in their team who are just faster than everything we've got and stronger than everything we've got. And that is an element of naivety that they didn't add strength. They didn't add the pace, and you can point to some of the first team signings we've already made this summer that they have looked to address both of those two elements with someone with pure pace, whose highlights suggest that they're really, really fast and then don't do anything with it when they get to the end, get to the box, and someone who looks like a bloody big bastard in his press shots. But no, I personally don't think match fitness is an issue. I do think that having a roaring crowd, to go back to what we said before, when your chest is heaving, being roared on to find another couple of percent helps, because it isn't a purely physical game. It's a massively mental game. And in our season review we did, I effectively said, and not this a unique thought by any means, we have 48 days, I think it is, between kicking the last ball and starting again, and 6 weeks Saturday or whatever it is. That's a very short turnaround to shake off losing 6 games. I think that the challenge this closed season and into the first month of next season, you mentioned Alex Neil and the hangover and things falling off last time we came down. I actually think the challenge is far more mental than physical. There's absolutely no doubt that even with the inevitable 5 or 6 that are going to go, we are going to have top 6, top 8 squads in the championship. There's just no doubt about that. Of course, we're going to have that. It might only be between the 4th and 8th best, but they're going to be in the top 6 to 8 selections of players anyone can call upon next year. The trick for me is how much churn they actually are going to have, and by how many players they're signing, it suggests they're expecting at least 5 to go. Or they're expecting to lose 3 through sales, and 2 or 3 they're going to try and push out because they just haven't worked out. Mm-hmm. And really, it's about the mental side of the game. Can we feel like a fresh season? Can we feel like a new page has been turned, etc., by the start of September when we need to start playing again? That's the real challenge that we've got. Now, my massive concern of that is, let's compare that to Project Restart. There was a huge mental job to be done there. It was all building up to this new kind of shortened season, and we failed miserably to be able to capitalise on any of our potential. We had a really friendly, home-leaning opening run of fixtures. We didn't have to play away in that new type of away environment, etc., for 3 games or whatever. So that's my main concern. That's the thing that I think is going to be hardest for them to sort. But if they get enough churn in, and fair play to them, they are trying to do it quickly. We look like we're going to have effectively our squad in place by the kickoff of pre-season. There's not going to be anyone joining a week before the first game. We're going to have a full pre-season with effectively all the lads in, it seems. So they're doing their best to give Daniel that opportunity to rebuild mentally, but that's far bigger our frailty last season, and my worry for the next season is mental, not physical. I don't think we look tired. I think we were mentally weak after scoring a goal. Showed that at Watford. We're mentally weak after half time. We showed that in pretty much every game, and we are completely incapable of defending balls into the box, whether that be from set pieces or from the wings. We've been shit at it for 3 years, and whoever's job it is on the coaching staff, might be 2 of them, might be 3 of them, might be 1 of them, that person either needs to be fired, or we need to get another person in to help them, or send them on a course, because we can't defend high balls into the box. Ben Godfrey wins balls 30 yards from goal. Yeah, he's fantastic in the air a lot of the time.
Yeah,
but there's something about the coaching, his positioning, whatever it might be, it doesn't seem to work properly once he's in the box. When we're defending those in-swinging balls or whatever it might be. Again, it goes back to what we've always said. Farke has got a couple of 2 or 3 coaching areas that he has yet to show that he has learned. He's yet to show he's developed. And defending high balls into the box is one of them. Being able to change things and drastically improve a game tactically, once the other team has set their stall out. I think those 2 things are absolutely crucial, that he needs to learn eventually to get those right. He won the championship without being able to fix either of those 2 things. We shipped so many goals, set pieces, etc. in the year we won the league.
I think that's a bit harsh to say that we won the championship. He changed a lot of games. I mean, the amount of late comebacks where we'd shifted formations, we'd made subs, You know, we then scored in 93rd, 97th, 96th.
We didn't do anything different though, John. We didn't tactically. We didn't.
No, we absolutely did. We went 3 at the back, plenty. We put 2 up front, plenty of times. You know, Jordan Road come on to 18. I think it's really harsh to say that he hasn't changed games in the Championship. You could definitely level that criticism at him this season. How I think the mitigation, the obvious mitigation around that is he hasn't had the tools at his disposal to be able to you know, kind of put on a game-changing player unless he's benched Emmy, and then the question mark has been, well, should Emmy have been starting from the, you know, minute 1 anyway?
Yeah.
Do you know what? I agree with you both, sort of, which is bizarre because you take opposing views. But I disagree with you, John, in terms of I didn't notice much on the pitch. Now, I'm not some sort of tactical mastermind by any means at all. I didn't notice much on the pitch in terms of a change of shape. I noticed the Jordan Rhodes coming on because you don't miss that, do you? And we did win and sort of gain points late on in games. But I disagree slightly in terms of I didn't see a change of shape, but maybe that's just because of the fact that I'm sat in the River End and I'm more focused on doing my knitting rather than actually watching the football. But I think I agree with Tom in terms of the fact that I'd like to see more changed. But it's such a weird thing for me because my views change so much in terms of the fact that when I'm at a game, you just get really frustrated and angry and you think, why is he not making this sub? Why is he not making this sub? And then a bit after, you're a bit like, okay, I see the thinking now. He doesn't want to. I think he seems a bit too scared to change anything at times in case it falls apart. But then, as you mentioned, at halftime, it just falls apart anyway. And I think since the restart, he's just, I think he's panicked in terms of this idea of he's tried to do too much. But this idea of mentality is a really interesting one to me. And I think I'll come to you first for this, John, in terms of this idea that Daniel Farke constantly shields his players in the press. Do you think that maybe it's time to stop doing that as much? Maybe put a bit of the fear of God into them, because it works for Chris Wilder. But do you think he needs to change something? Because the mentality this season, it's important to stress, just hasn't been there.
So are you specifically referencing that he hasn't been digging out players in the press, or, you know, kind of his post-match stuff?
His post-match stuff to me is sometimes quite bizarre. He handles himself in the same way, which is what's bizarre to me. Sometimes I think he should put his hands up and say, we weren't good enough, I got it wrong. Whereas constantly he says, oh, I'm happy with that level of performance. But you look at post-Everton. Now, that game, I don't think Norwich were actually that bad. They did naff all, but they didn't look sort of like they're on the back foot the entire game.
And I think he had a point when he did his post-match in that game. He pretty much came out and said, if the crowd had been here, I think we'd have won tonight, or I think we'd have got a point, you know, tonight. And I think he was right. I think that there was a semblance of a point there to say that, do you know what? I think we had enough to do something against Everton, and with a fair wind behind us, you know, 27,000 fans, you know, really making sure that Carrow was rocking. I think we'd have got something. Now, would that have meant that we'd have then gone on some magical run? Absolutely not. But, you know, we'd have probably ended up in better stead with a little bit more momentum than we've currently got. I think it's interesting. I don't think Farke has changed his stance from the minute he joined the club to right now, in terms of he will not publicly criticise young players, you know, kind of pretty much any of the time, you know, but equally he won't publicly praise his young players too much either, because he doesn't want them to, you know, kind of get carried away. And he makes that point, you know, kind of over and over and over. And actually that stood us in really good stead. So, you know, you look at the amount of players that he's brought through, that's not a bad tactic, you know. And you could even, you know, kind of say this season, you know, Todd Cantwell, you know, he hasn't been effusive in his praise of Todd Cantwell, but Todd Cantwell's had a stellar season. You know, I think, what was he, second or third in terms of the player of the season? But for me, you know, Tim Krul aside, has been the absolute standout in this side. So it's really easy to be critical of Daniel Farke when things are going wrong. And I think we all are still on board with him. But equally, he hasn't really changed what he was doing, you know, kind of 2 seasons ago and a season ago. And I think if he takes that into the Championship now and he shields his younger players, and it is, you know, a really, really young squad, and all of the investment that's currently happening are all players under 22, 23, he's going to have to continue to do that. You know, he's going to have to make sure that they're shielded. Does that mean that he's not digging them out, you know, kind of in the changing rooms? Of course he is. Of course he, you know, he's finding fault where it needs to be, and he's trying to rectify that. So no, I don't think is as much to worry about as some people are making out.
Do you think it's just a case of patience then? Because I suppose I agree. And you made a great point about sort of the promotion winning season and the season before that, because realistically that was just sort of one long season. That's sort of the way I look at it in terms of the development. And you make a brilliant point about the fact that his resume in terms of young players is phenomenal, isn't it? You look at players, I don't think there's anything in it, but you look at a player like Max Aarons being linked with Bayern Munich, it just sort of sums up the job he's doing. That rumour can be believed. But it's a tough one, isn't it? I think it is just sort of emotion at the time, and it's difficult to sort of look at it from a reasonable point of view, especially after, is it the worst season in the club's history in the Premier League or something?
It's the worst run for 100 years in terms of losing that many games in a row.
What is the end game of it, of not the project, but Daniel Farke doing that? Is it just a case of fans have to be patient or have to learn to ignore it, so to speak? But what is the end game of Daniel Farke, say, taking Norwich and making them a yo-yo team? Not that we already weren't, but that's the way I see it going right now. And I'm being naive, obviously, because I know it, but at the same time, I can't help but think it. What is the actual end game of Daniel Farke's idea of shielding players, going up, coming down? What is it?
Well, I actually think that it's not just Daniel Farke. I think that the three guys running the exec committee, and Daniel Farke included, the brief they've got is to shepherd this football club into a stronger position than when they inherited it, from a financial point of view, commercial point of view, a technology point of view, facilities point of view, playing squad point of view, culture of the way we play football from the academy upwards. And you can point to pretty much every single one of those, and confirm that's happening. They've changed the culture of the company, all the employees that are working there. They've got a fresh kind of approach to how they employ people, the types of people they take on. And it's genuinely impressive how much of a professionalism has been added maybe to the football club compared to what was there 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, having worked with the club from a kind of fan content point of view, from a professional point of view personally, and obviously as a fan for the best part of 30 years, familiar with the club with many different hats on. Genuinely don't think we've ever been in better hands when it comes to how smooth the operation is. It's being run in a really smooth, sensible way, but it's also being run knowing that the fans and the community is the only reason they exist. So this whole finishing in the top 26 teams, we want to be a top 26 team, is effectively, they have taken a sensible fiscal, logistical look at where they're at, and finishing in the top 26 clubs is logical to be, that's where the bar is for the current model we have. Now, what I believe they're looking to achieve is, at the end of that run, so the end game, as you point it, would be, there is now investors. That means that we are an established Premier League club, likely towards the bottom end of the Premier League, but we're an established enough Premier League club that it's not pie in the sky to get an investor in that needs to be shady money. So we're recording this on the day that the Newcastle investors have pulled out. We don't want dirty money. We don't want weirdo, like no one's ever heard of you, because effectively we're so desperate for the cash, and we're such a dodgy asset with so many skeletons in the closet that effectively you would have to be a little bit shady to take us on. We want to be able to be picky about a potential buyer, and we're going to attract better buyers who can take us on into more of a, we're going to spend decent money and achieve something level, by having the club set up in really, really good foundations off the pitch, so that they're not going to walk in and go, well, I've got to spend 100 million off the pitch until we're even worth spending money on the pitch, right? And they are doing that. They are well along the way of doing that. And then likewise, on the pitch, with strengthening the squad with these younger players that are going to constantly be, lots of them are going to be able to sell for lots and lots of cash, like we are doing with the current crop of players, hopefully over the summer. That is going to set us up to be a really saleable asset. And I think that's the end goal over the next 18 months to 2 years. It is effectively these three people plus Farke to be able to kind of hand back the keys at the end of their 3, 5, 7, whatever their reign is, and say, you're really well set now. And so many of the problems you had when we took over are no longer there.
I'm going to ask you a very tough question now, which is in fact, what positives, whatever, what can you take from this season, as a whole, not just sort of Project Restart and that shit show, but what can we take from the whole thing?
It's finished. That's positive.
Yeah.
We haven't got to deal with it anymore. I mean, I'm super looking forward to next season. The Championship is a better league. The coverage is better. You get a bad result out of your system quicker. The away days are more fun.
Yeah.
There are so many reasons to be positive. We are looking to hopefully get fans back into stadiums sooner. Soon, full stop. So, everything looking forward is positive. So it's one of those things where, because everything's been so bad for the last 2 or 3 months, the coming 2 or 3 months looks infinitely better, like so much more positive.
Do you think it is just looking forward to the Championship and genuinely not just even thinking about this season that's just gone?
It's really tricky because there is, I mean, as Tom's just said, there's really next to nothing that you can draw from as a positive. Probably, the 2 elder statesmen of the squad, so Tim Krul and Alex Tetty, you'd have to say, for me, they were absolutely amazing. Todd Cantwell as well has been really good all season. But that aside, actually, it's all pretty grim. Apart from, kind of it's been punctuated, or not punctuated necessarily, but kind of it's been interspersed with just the odd ridiculous results. So you look at Manchester City, which you'll have reviewed earlier with kind of different guys. You look at the Leicester game. You look at kind of probably that we grabbed a point away at Leicester. There's been some real results within the season where you just go, actually, we can bloody the nose of the big boys. With a fair wind behind us, we're capable of getting results against these kinds of sides. So you could probably kind of draw a little bit of heart from that, but apart from that, no, it's all very grim.
I think I'll take Spurs and Man City, and that's about it. That's me done. I'll sort of put that in my suitcase and get ready for the next season. Tom, next season, fans, just tell us about that.
So what we understand, we've been involved in the consultation process that's been happening so far. There's a few things that it's worth that we've understood so far, which are really, really positive. So the club has got obviously form in not necessarily consulting the fans. They've learned their lesson and held their hands up at the time that they need to make sure they get out in front of the fan consultation sooner. So we're delighted with how fair they are aiming to make this. That's kind of the overwhelming sense that we had after the meeting that took place earlier this week. Effectively, they can't guarantee you your seat because you've got to be 4 seats away from the next person, and that's just not feasible to do. But they are effectively going to make sure that if it ends up being about 1 in 3, for example, i.e. you can attend 1 in every 3 games for the first few games of the season, and it's not them that sets that rule. Remember, it's the kind of the SAG, they're the kind of health and safety gurus that they have to kind of apply to get as many people as they can. And let's have it right, the club would be full if they thought it was safe to do so. But whatever the figure is, let's say, for example, based on the number of sold season ticket holders are going to be able to go to 1 in 3 games. Then you will effectively choose which of those 3 games in sets of 3 you can go to, you would like to go to. There is going to be the opportunity to group together in a bubble or a pod, whereby, for example, if you've got a carer, if you've got a dependent, if you're driving an 8-year-old, if you've got some kind of requirement whereby you can't go to the game on your own without another person, then of course that needs to be taken into consideration. So effectively you want 4 seats together or 2 seats together, and likewise, if that's because you really like drinking in the pub with Gary just before, and actually you want to go to any game you want to go to, you only want to go to if you can get the seat 4 seats away from Gary or right next to Gary, fine. It's going to be very similar to picking away seats. Effectively, no one has a season ticket seat, but the point is you have got a seat in the ground. So it will be on a kind of first come, first served kind of basis, just like any kind of sale, but the priority will be season ticket holders. And what's absolutely crucial, and John Punt was very, very vocal on this, there will be no commercialisation of that. It will not be, well, yeah, I'm a season ticket holder, but I've paid an extra £100, so I'm a season ticket holder gold, and I'm a season ticket holder bronze, so I have to wait until 11 o'clock no. All season ticket holders come first. All season ticket holders are equal. You will get a game every 1 in 3, 1 in 4, however many thousand we're allowed through the doors, and they do not know currently how many that's going to be. But let's say, for sake of arguments, around 1 in 3. Then if the first 3 games are Wycombe, Derby, Reading, then you basically say, well, that's on the Tuesday night, can't do that because of work, so I'll look to go on Derby. Actually, I can get much closer to my season ticket seat, and there's 3 together, so me, Punt and Ben, we can all sit, 12 seats, 3 of us, 4 apart, we can all sit together for the Reading game. Brilliant. I will pick that one, and that will be the one I'll go. That obviously means those 3 seats are then gone, and you won't obviously be able to get a seat for the other 2 because that's your 1 in 3. And the point being that when all of those seats are sold, you definitely will have had an opportunity to go to at least 1 in those 3. The 2 that you're not able to go to, you will get a rebate for that. So effectively, you're not going to lose out money-wise. You're not going to be paying for a game that you can't get to. The club are actually being really proactive in trying to find potentials for streaming. They're trying to find ways of making it possible for season ticket holders to get access to watch all games home and away, so that when they're missing out, they are actually able to still watch the games. And they're still at relatively early stages for contractual and other reasons, and obviously the EFL own those rights, so that's not an easy thing for them to sort, but they are genuinely trying to do that. And effectively, when you we know that there are vulnerable people who aren't going to want to risk going into the ground, and there's an elderly population and at risk, people with certain conditions that are going to be at the ground. So it may well be that there is like a second pot of tickets that become available, because after they do the 1 in 3 thing, if only of the 20-odd thousand season ticket holders, only 17,000 actually are comfortable going to the games in September, October, then there might be another 1,000 left or whatever. That might then go back to season ticket holders who haven't already picked one. It might be members, don't know, still early days. But the most important thing, and the thing that we are so heartened by, is they are being really fair. They are completely prioritising season ticket holders. They are not trying to in any way make extra fiver here or there by me paying extra so that I get to choose before Ben. And they are really, really being logistically sensible around the fact that, if John's going to take is one of his little uns, if I'm going to take my old dad, point is my old dad's not going to go on his own. John's little un's not going to go on their own. So you can you can basically say, I'll have your customer number or whatever, and you'll put it together, and you can kind of get tickets together. You're going to have photo ID because they've got to do the track and trace. So you can't get 4 tickets together and then just get 3 randoms to turn up for the season tickets. You do actually need to say that's the person that's coming on that day, and here's their photo ID. And obviously the club need to know up front who's coming, and that's just sensible. So it's prioritising season ticket holders who want to be there, who are willing to make the effort to say these are the people who are going to be there and remember their driving licence or whatever on the day. We've been really, really heartened by how desperate they are to get season ticket holders back into the ground as safely and as fairly as they possibly can.
I think you've absolutely covered every base there fairly well. And I think the main concern for me and many fans was this idea of a lottery, which they are not doing, which is really pleasing to see. That I was very worried about that because I thought that's only going to end badly. And I know that was mentioned on, what was it, like a webinar they did, and then Ben Kensel was just like, no, that's not going to happen. And when he said that, you sort of breathe a sigh of relief. But I think in terms of everything, last season, we can call it now, thank God for that. That's finished. Next season, you talk about the fans there, and you inform everyone very well there. And I think no stone is currently left unturned. There'll be more information to come, of course. But guys, I'm not going to say prediction, but I do want to sort of get your idea of what maybe you're expecting, hoping. You can sort of band them together, you can speak about them individually, but what are either of you expecting next season to sign off on?
I think for me, the bit that I miss is this team that's virtually got a gun-ho approach that plays with verve and swagger, and there's a zip about the passing, and the whole performance level has gone. It's all really flat in that respect at the moment. So I wouldn't necessarily. I'm not going to predict something firm in terms of where we're going to finish in the league, because it's the championship. No one knows. But actually, what I want to see back is Farker ball in full flow. You want to see Timi Pukki back in the goals. You want hopefully someone like, probably not Emi Buendia, but an Emi Buendia or a Todd Cantwell pulling the strings. You just want to be entertained. That's why we go to the football. You go to the football to be with your mates and to be entertained by the team that you love. that's what we've missed, probably for the last 6 months. So if I can have that back, that would be lovely.
What about you, Tom?
Yeah, I don't know who's going to be in the squad. If they have the kind of churn that it looks like there's going to be, and I personally want, then we could start really fast and we can get on a roll early doors. But John's hit the nail on the head. We want to be entertained again. We want to feel like we're not soft touches like we have turned into in the last 6 months or so. You want to see them play the Norwich way. Farker ball is being taught throughout the academy. They've got cameras set up to check that all of the sessions are following the right patterns in terms of getting those patterns of play going all the way up to the first team. That's what we now come to expect. That is the blueprint of a Norwich team, is to play fast, attacking football, playing in triangles, keeping the ball, having possession, probing until you're patient, until you get that through ball that unlocks the defence and you're in. And if we start to be on top again in games, and obviously if we start winning games, then that's going to be really, really enjoyable. My prediction is that, unfortunately, I am pessimistic about whether or not this mental side of things can be broken. I just think it's such a short summer, and shaking, losing 11 games in a row. I mean, even at Sunday League level, it's going to be hard. That's going to be hard to say we're not losers anymore. If they get rid of the 5 to 7 players they're trying to shift, and it is a genuinely 25% difference matchday squad to going into the next season, then it's much easier to say, well, actually there's 6 people in the 11 that weren't here that started at the Etihad. Then yeah, it's a bit easier mentally to go into that. If they genuinely can get the outgoings as well as the incomings they're doing, then maybe we can hit the ground running. I worry that we might still be in a bit of a mire come late October, early November, and even if there are only 6,000 fans in there, there might be 3,000 of them saying you don't know what you're doing. But I've been proved wrong before, and I'd love to be proved wrong again.
I think the conclusion from that is next season is going to be a challenge, and we just want to be entertained again. I think that's literally just about it for us, and maybe for most Norwich City fans. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Not that I need to do this, because I'm sure everyone knows where you guys are, but one of you, where are you being found? Twitter, wherever, just anywhere.
John lives in Meltdown.
Yeah, I live in Meltdown. Tom, you're Taven, aren't you, boy?
I'm in Taven, yeah. I'm quite near Maddie off in the flag squad, so if you come around, you can start to see us both within a few houses.
Double up. Yeah, lovely. But no, if people did want to support us, then probably the best place is to visit the website, which is AlongComeNorwich.com. And if you wanted to buy something, we've got some lovely face masks on sale at the moment, or badges, or fanzines. So that would be great.
How much have we raised for the good charities off the back of the face masks, John?
So it's probably a really good opportunity to say thank you to people. Actually, Ben, if you'll just afford us a couple of moments, that we have sold in excess of 2,000 face masks, which is going to mean that we will donate at least £4,500 to local charities and good causes. Some of that will go to, and has already gone to, Norwich City's Community Sports Foundation. We've donated to Leeway locally as well, and New Roots, which is a charity that works with refugees in the area. And we are considering other good causes as well that we're going to donate to locally. And none of that would have been possible without all the lovely people that have bought a face mask. So thank you.
There you go, guys. Cheers. I think the main thing to take from this video is wear a mask. Don't be an idiot. And if you're going to wear one, make sure it's a Norwich City one.
It's a Norwich one, yeah.
Exactly, guys. It's been a pleasure. If everyone could like the video, I'd be very, very grateful. If you could subscribe to the YouTube channel, I'd be very grateful as well. I've said that so many times in the past few days. It's actually just sort of rolling off the tip of my tongue with ease now. But yeah, we'll see you again very, very soon.